as many of us probably know, Africa is a growing continent and currently home to roughly 17% of the world's population. Unfortunately, we're also home to about 24% of the world's burden of disease, and yet we account for less than 1% of scientific research output and probably about 0.5% of the patent applications, so intellectual property in science and technology. So we have a lot of people, we have a lot of health problems, and yet we have very little research capacity to do anything about those problems, which obviously leaves the continent at a severe disadvantage and leaves the continent very vulnerable. Now you could ask the question, why this? Why this lack? Why is it that a continent that has been independent for at least 50 to 60 years, at least in Ghana, why is it that we still only account for 1% of research output? In fact, if you look at the number of patents registered, in 2019, China alone registered 1.4 million patents. The United States registered about 600,000 patents. Japan, a tiny country, registered 300,000 patents. The whole continent of Africa registered 12,000 patents. I couldn't find any data on Ghana for 2019, but for 2016, Ghana registered 31 patents. 31 versus 1.4 million. Okay, China is big. Let's compare ourselves to a country that we like to compare ourselves to, Malaysia. They were very like us not that long ago. Malaysia registered 7,000 patents. The same year, Ghana registered 31. So the question is, why are we so far behind? Why is our research and development so limited? And I think it starts with a lack of investment. Much of Africa invests very little money in R&D. As a proportion of GDP, the United States every year invests over 2.5% of its GDP in research and development. Now, obviously, we know the US has a very large GDP. So 2.5% of a large number is a lot of money. Most African countries, including Ghana, invest less than 0.5% of their relatively smaller GDPs on research and development. So there's a huge shortfall in support for research and development from the public sector. I talked about Malaysia. Malaysia was where we were in the 90s. They were investing 0.2%. Then they began to invest more, currently investing 1.7%. And there's been a significant, obvious increase in their research output, suggesting that when governments decide to invest in research and development, it translates almost immediately to a noticeable increase in output. So that is the first problem. We're not investing enough. Our countries are not investing enough. Successive governments have not invested enough in research and development. Now, that sounds like a very bleak story, but there is hope. Starting in 2014, the World Bank began an initiative called the African Centers of Excellence, where the World Bank since then has invested $580 million across Africa to build centers of excellence in research. In Ghana, we have a number of those. The University of Ghana currently has at least 3 of such centers. Now, in this case, these are loans from the World Bank. So we have to give credit to the governments in power at those times for underwriting those loans. So in this case, the World Bank forced the hands of African governments to actually invest in research. Now, of course, those programs have since now ended. So we have to worry about sustainability. But certainly, $580 million since 2014 has been invested. And it has had results. Over 2,000 PhDs have been trained in Africa. 11,000 master's degrees have been awarded, all fully funded through this African Center of Excellence program. But that also now creates a problem. Where are these people going to work? We've generated 2,000 PhDs, but I can guarantee you that most of these people who have been trained are no longer on the continent. Unfortunately, the brain drain persists because while we are focused on building training capacity, we do not focus on building opportunities for employment for these highly skilled people. Where should somebody with a PhD go if not to teach at a university? And so what we've actually done, unfortunately, is we've made our brain drain more expensive. We used to lose people in high school when they went off for their first degree to Europe or North America and never came back. Now we can train them to get a PhD in immunology, molecular biology, in physics, in chemistry, and then we lose them to the biotechs and the pharmaceutical companies around the world. So actually our brain drain has not gotten better, our brain drain has just gotten more expensive. So when I returned to Ghana, trying not to be brain drained myself, I took up a faculty position at the University of Ghana at WACBIP, which itself is a center of excellence. So that is one advantage. That World Bank money brought someone like me back, and there are many like me who have been repatriated thanks to this center. But I was immediately frustrated with the fact that all these students I was training, some of whom had real talent, had no options outside of the university for work. In the US, working at university is the last thing on the mind of a young PhD student at MIT or Harvard or any of the big schools. Many of them go into well-paying jobs in the pharmaceutical or biotech industry, of which Ghana has none. So, prompted by that, I began to ask myself if the university was really the only place I wanted to work, or whether there was a need to try to do something else. 10 years of investment by the World Bank, by other donors, via our government, had trained a lot of people. But where was phase 2? Where were these people going to go? And in my opinion, that is where the private sector comes in. There needs to be generation of jobs for young people who have very high levels of skill outside of academia. So in order to do something, my small part to do that, I got a group of people together, and in June of 2020, we founded a company called Yemaachi Biotech. Now, Yemaachi Biotech is focused on cancer. We are focused on understanding and diversifying precision oncology. Now, I don't have a lot of time, but let me try to unpack that briefly. Precision medicine is a term that is thrown around all the time these days. It's the idea that we no longer treat people with a one-size-fits-all approach, but instead, we treat people based on their own unique genotype or genetics and how they respond to medication. It means somebody may get drug A and somebody may get drug B for the same condition, but based on their genome or their environmental exposure, we can identify that these people will respond better to those respective drugs. So, precision medicine depends on an understanding of the population in which you are treating. Unfortunately, 78% of all genomic data available globally is from people of Caucasian origin. 2% is from people of African descent. That creates a problem because it means most precision medicine is skewed towards people of Caucasian descent. Basically, to put it bluntly, it's skewed to work best in white people and work worst in black people. And that is not altogether, it's not because they've specifically targeted us for neglect. It's because we ourselves are not doing our own research, and so, quite frankly, why should somebody study you for you? So Yemaachi aims to diversify precision oncology by building up research capacity to understand cancer in the African population. By generating this data, we then look to leverage partnerships with pharmaceutical and biotech companies around the world to make sure to develop the next generation of diagnostics and therapeutics for cancer that are going to be ethnicity agnostic. Therefore, not necessarily only focus on people of African descent, but not leave people of African descent out. Now, I should mention that one of the great resources Africa has, beyond all our natural resources, is our African genome. The African population across this continent is the most genetically diverse population anywhere in the world. Now, that means there are great discoveries to be made about human medicine and human health just by studying African people. So that is the unique thing that Yemaachi hopes to bring. Now, we're focused on cancer because over the last few years, there has been a significant shift in the diseases that cause majority of the morbidity and the disease on this continent. We talk about malaria, we talk about HIV, we talk about tuberculosis. But if you check the data, you will find that malaria currently is responsible for about 400,000 to 500,000 deaths annually. HIV, a similar number. Cancer is responsible for 800,000 deaths in Africa every year. Cancer kills almost twice the number of people that malaria kills every year in Africa. And yet, if you go to the universities, if you go to Noguchi, if you go to University of Nairobi, nearly all the research that is being done, of the small amount of research that is being done in Africa, is focused on infectious disease. So that is why Yemaachi has chosen to focus on cancer. Not that infectious disease is no longer important, but Africa has a serious problem with non-communicable disease, a serious problem with cancer, and so we need to build capacity. So before I wind up, just to give you a brief update of where we are, we began operations properly in March of this year. Since then, we've been admitted to Y Combinator, which is the most prestigious startup accelerator arguably anywhere in the world. We're the only Ghanaian company in the most recent batch, one of only 15 companies out of 377, out of 15,000 applicants, so we're quite proud of that. Since Y Combinator, we're obviously raising money. You can't do biotech without raising money, so we're working on our seed round. But most significantly, we've already begun to do research. We're currently working on a breast cancer study together with a US-based company looking at breast cancer in women in Cape Coast using a blood-based test. The idea of this is it's much less invasive than a tissue biopsy, and if it can be developed effectively, could significantly improve the way breast cancer and potentially other cancers are managed. So just this gives you one example of the kind of work we are doing. We currently have relationships in Ghana, in Nigeria, and in Kenya, and we're looking to begin to scale up across Africa, following M-Pharma's footsteps, hopefully, with time. So to sort of sum up and finally sort of end, I would say the vision for Yemaachi is to build a globally competitive company that happens to be headquartered in Accra. We're not a Ghanaian company. We're not an African company. We are a global company, but we are based in Africa. And our aim is to show the world what it means to be African, what it means to be excellent, and the fact that those two things are not mutually exclusive. Thank you.